This is yet another observability kickoff meeting. So let's get started. I prepped some slide just for getting something going, so some discussions going. Can you guys see the screen? Oh, see the window?
Yeah, I can see.
Cool. So I think during the summit, Ravi was asking if we do observability, it should be use case driven. So I thought that was a good suggestion. I'm not suggesting this is a particular use case, but I'm kind of looking into this and said, hey, let's start with what we want, what an application wants to do. I think so. I don't know what service assurance is doing. So this I'm not using service assurance as a use case. I think they also kind of zero in a use case. So I don't want to start with that. Start with something much more simplistic. And that's because I'm still in the middle of writing this. The NF topology controller. The NF topology controller is a L2 item. What it does is it's a sample application, if you will, that would be utilizing the primitives of Nefio, and kind of add a layer of network function topologies on top of that. And never mind the config side. What actually happens at the end, what we want to happen at the end, because so for L2, for those who actually know something about the NF topology controller, when the plan for L1, we wanted the topology controllers to be a way to talk to a Google seeded module called ESA, the Edge status aggregator. That, as we said, is not very well received by the community, and so in this case, I'm severing that I'm cutting that connections. So NF topology controller now tracks the status up to deployed. So within the management clusters, all I could see is a package revision object is approved. So they're stored into deployment repo, and at that point, that's the status that we will send on a particular network functions. The original idea is it would actually collect the statuses of all the network functions, all the NF deployments that we send out. Not necessarily the whole thing, supposedly, but at least enough information for them to say, hey, this is succeeded, which is not. And obviously, this is continuously changing. Without ESA, I don't have that. I don't have that connections. So one use case, very simple use case, actually, would be how do I use observability as a framework to be able to get the statuses off of a workload cluster, across all the workload clusters, and actually across all the network function instances that were deployed off of this particular topology. So that seems like a very simple use case. So if you go a little into it, the status today is very simple for network for NF deployment, but then if you really think about it, the very interesting thing is we give them a capacity intent. That's something where we are not tracking in terms of, oh, can you do it? And it's very hard to track that, is the network function instance that we created able to handle this capacity per se. And if you look at the CLD today, many discussions we had, we at the end decided that to pack all the capacities of various different network functions into a single structure. So for one thing, the UPF would be able to track. We're tracking throughput for UPF supposedly. We are tracking sessions for SMF, and the connections. So that the idea of the connection is how many UPF is connected to SMF, but it could be used for many other things, and then subscribers for AMFs. So can we actually meaningfully track these set of informations off of NetField framework, the observability framework. So that was the first peel of the onion is I only want to get all the statuses. But then if it's just getting all the statuses, one interesting thing off of our intent is the capacity that we send out. So today we translate capacity into our resource needs, which is the CPUs and memory. But there's no feedback whether or not that actually works. So the one problem to tackle would be let's expose that information. I also understand we don't have the test bed and things to really stress the system, but then let's never mind that for a moment. Let's go with DAD. Again, this is just one example. One problem we have, and based on what we have today, is that 3.5GC practically gives us nothing to do any of this. Actually, out of these, AMF is there. The AMF needs are there. For 3.5GC, that's a REST API that you can use. They have a web UI, so they use it for that. The REST API you can use on to get the subscribers informations off of 3.5GC, so that you can probably do a number of subscribers using that REST API. But then nothing else. There's really nothing else. There's no metrics. There's logs, but then there's no metrics. There's nothing to tell you how many sessions are actually being used right now. There's obviously no throughput information on a system. So again, one possible way just to build the ability to scrape a status, which includes whether or not capacity's intent is met, is that we talked about that, I guess, during the summit, is that we will create an observability sidecar that runs in the same pod as the network functions workload. All 3.5GC's network functions are just a single pod. So you can place an observability sidecar right next to it. Out of that, you want informations on. So for UPF, for example, you can scrap informations on the on throughput. Very simply. I mean, this is again not me telling you how to do something, but it's more like one possibility that you can think of for doing. Once you use a sidecar, sidecar obviously, as you all know, is another container that runs in the same pod. Pod is a virtual abstraction, so it's not something where it binds any processes together or anything like that. It's basically just two things that runs in the same node, but it shares the same network namespace. So for all your secondary interfaces that you created on your network function workload, the sidecar will be able to see the same secondary interfaces, and then they'll be able to get stats out of that. So if you continuously run if config on either the RX side or the TX side of N36, one side would be the upload, the uplink throughput. Let's say you're doing N3, the uplink throughput for the RX would be the uplink throughput, and then the TX of that, or the RX of N6 would be the downlink throughput. Again, there's only for 3.5GC what we set up today is just one N6 and one N3. So and then you periodically sample, so that time interval and the difference between the packet count and byte count would give you the TPS, not TPS, the throughput, and you can expose that as a metric. Obviously, the time at that case is on your sample rate. Let's say you do it every minute, which is pretty wide. Then you have an approximate of a 1 minute. And for those who want to track the number of sessions that are going right now, you can use SS periodically to dump the socket connections. You can put it on a log, and so we'll be able to see it, the sidecar logs. And then BPF opens up the whole can of things that you can do in terms of getting any additional visibility data. One that may actually be interesting would be you tap onto the sock map on the sockets that you're interested in based on the source port or destination IP. You can then the PPF program would know whether or not the socket is established, packets start coming in and things like this. And then for every different states, you can send an open tracing span to just tracking it. And
Steven, one thing of eBPF on the sidecar is I think you need root privileges.
Yes. Yeah, so privilege is true on that one. Yeah,
I don't think it's
a viable. So to do BPF on that, yeah, that would be so.
What I'm trying to say is that for a live, I think for a POC you can do it, but for a live deployment, it's probably not viable. But I think you can use the statistics of the network namespace that you have in a container, so you can use the Linux stats.
Right.
But they are less flexible, but...
Yeah, BPF is a challenge. I think when I was in the summit, I haven't actually looked at it. Alexis gave me the...
I used it.
You used it too? Okay. NetOps, I think. OpenShift is using that. And then I haven't looked at it. They said that they would
they use it at the host level, right? So the problem is installing a BPF program. You require to be root.
Correct. Yeah. So that is needed. Yeah, I wrote it before too. Yeah, that was needed. I just wonder whether or not anyone has. Well, there's no way to relax this because obviously you need root access to load something into kernel. That is a BPF requirement also. That when you're executing something in the context of the kernel, so you have to be root. Yeah. So
that's the problem with using it in a sidecar. I think unless it's I think and it's fairly recent that I use it. So use it in the user program is a bit of a challenge, I think.
Okay.
At the host, it's okay, but we could use Linux stats, right?
Yeah, so at the very least, we can use those first. Tracing would be tougher in that case, or you can use NC, I guess. You can use something to keep on polling the status. But anyway, there's a variety of things that you probably would be able to do just to use Linux commands. I think that would be. Go ahead.
Idea of Sandeep here. So idea of sidecar is just to have some more control, or can it not be a separate entity?
It's more like the visibility. So you're running something on the same network namespace as the workload, so that allows us to see the same. So we right now we are interested in just networking related stuff.
Yeah.
So we're here to so sidecar allows us to view the network the same way the workload views the network. Yeah. So that's the interesting way. Well, not interesting. That would be the first thing I would think of. But then obviously, again, I'm not the only one doing
but still the network related KPI or the NF specific KPI like a throughput, the session and all those things may not be visible to sidecar as well, right? Because it's very application specific. Until unless the NF really exposes via some sort of endpoint or some sort of a logs traces, will the sidecar will have access to those kind of KPI?
They are not. So if there's something that is specific to the workload, so what we'll be able to see in Linux is all the connections that are going in and out of the pod.
Okay.
And then whether or not they would encrypt it or something to a point where we wouldn't be able to see some a lot of things.
Right.
That would be case by case basis. That's definitely one of the things to experiment.
So it's like an inference. We then kind of AML or prediction kind of thing is there. If you really see that you more the session you have, we assume that this throughput will be going down. We are going in that kind of scenario.
No, well, no. So no. So we are just sending stats out. So at this point, you're getting a list, a whole list of connections that are going through the system right now.
So but that doesn't not necessarily translates into the exact KPI what kind of a 3GPP specifies, right? Like max throughput or DLP utilization and all those things.
No, throughput would be a little easier. Throughput is basically just how many bytes and how many packets are going through for a particular interface during that time. So it's an aggregate of the things on the system. I mean, to be honest, the only thing that we really care about is the data traffic. So the N4 really doesn't matter that much. But then all three of them you'll be able to see. So we can basically, so that's the throughput we can send out. Now, would the throughput be 100% data traffic for UPF, for example? Take out the N4, most of them pretty much are, I would say. And then so these are more approximations in a way, but it's not that far off, I would say.
So, Steven, do you find the sidecar solution as a long-term solution, or it's proposed just because 35GC proposed nothing?
Oh, I'm open to I actually want to just start thinking about building stuff.
Yeah,
so we can
because
get more
in fact
information.
it will be good, right? If vendors could expose the metrics there.
So I would
relevant to
guess
them.
I would imagine most of the other network function vendors would have better metrics exposed in the system.
We do, Piotr, for example. So the problem is the format, right? So what we do at the moment is this. So we have counters in various forms, right? Or KPIs in various forms. So what we have done is we have built a sidecar to expose it, for example, in Prometheus format, right? So here the difference is that we have the counters, right? But they are not in the right format. So you basically do a formatting thing, right? Whereas in this case of 35GC, we need to get the stats.
Yes. Yeah, we need to. So as part of the POC, we basically are just saying that 35GC doesn't have anything, and therefore we'll basically generate stuff off of ourselves.
And I think so. My comment on eBPF is, I think my only comment is we can use it. Don't get me wrong, but I think in a live deployment, it's probably not seen as a good approach because of the root access requirements that it exposes.
Right.
But for us to demonstrate something that it's viable, so I just wanted to say that eBPF challenges to use it in real life as a sidecar is that it has this root access dependency, in which case it makes it not viable for a live implementation. I think for us here, I think it's okay, but because we don't have stats basically, right?
So any workaround for that to go into the live, like for example, the access which NF has, can it has like actual pod has, can it have like that? The sidecar?
Yes, correct. There's not a problem. And if you do a sidecar, you basically have access to the same network namespace that the container has. So if you don't do eBPF, you could just look at the counters on the interface, basically.
Yeah.
Right? So so then you bits packets per second and bits per second and stuff like that. So that you can get without eBPF, I think. If you want to go to session level information, I think you can use contract probably.
Yeah.
So you can do things without eBPF, but it's limited. So if you really want to go to the level of tracing and stuff like that, I think then you'll end up with eBPF. But if you do basic stuff, you don't need it.
And if we really want to connect to some sort of a API, like let's say tomorrow we somehow force or somehow request that each and every NF exposes some sort of a standard thing via API, and then it need not be sidecar, right? It can be some sort of
So obviously, if the vendor's network function supports whatever KPI we propose to them, that would be they don't need the sidecar. The sidecar is for now for POC purpose, and then if folks find it useful, the code will be available. But then it's not a requirement. They would, as we said, if we establish, we said later, when we establish what KPI that we are interested in, it is actually up to the network function vendors to map whatever means they can get those into a Nephew requested KPI.
And every sidecar will be specific to the NF, right?
How to do it is specific to the NFs, yeah.
But I think, Steven, are we going to try to standardize KPIs? Because I think 3GPP has them.
Oh no, if they do have a standard, then we should adapt to this. It's more or less like if we have a use case, and then that use case, and then we'll map those use cases into 3GPP standards. We're not going to be able to support all of them from the get-go, but then we should actually examine what they have, and then as you said, we want to drive it using use case rather than having a platform that basically just take all the 3GPP KPIs and say you support all of that, and then Nephiel would basically just expose them. I would rather be more like in a use case basis.
So what's the use case here? You're saying that
so the use case here is simple. So we have in R1 we did one, and then R2 we define what NF deployment has, and then we had an interesting one, which is we have a capacity intent. So the first thing to do would be, are we meeting that capacity intent? Or we were tracked, at the very least, we have the observability side of the work would be able to track visibility data that maps directly into the capacity intent.
So today capacity is just CPU and RAM and all those things, right?
No, capacity is, our capacities are things like number of sessions, the throughput, and things like this.
Now, Steven, just to in my view of the world, right, of these capacity, what normally happens is you get an intent with a certain capacity, right? What typically happens today is there is if you look to the autoscaler that you have on the cluster, so what normally happens in my view is that it's what we do today for network function is that if you get a certain intent with a certain demand, then there is a local metric collector that you can use, and you use an autoscaler, and you report whether you are okay or not okay, right? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that all of this typically happens on the workload cluster. And there is an autoscaler, like KEDA has a metric system which you can extend to certain metrics, and it will trigger actions on the network function. Because typically the capacity, the way I look at it is this, right? So the capacity is a local thing normally, because you say here's the intent, and you have the cluster autonomously act upon this, right? And he will do auto-scaling and what have you, or to basically accommodate for that request. And that system typically, so the way that system works is that you already provide information to the autoscaler, and so it has built-in metrics, but you can actually extend metrics to it. And then the system, so the workload cluster basically deals with this automatically, right? There's nothing on the management cluster that is needed to do anything for it. But I think what we probably want is that to give the status of that NF deployment towards the management cluster.
Well, so I mean, we haven't got to a management cluster yet, but so the first thing to do would be able to get those metrics out.
Yes.
And then so this is this part. This is sidecar part. The other part would be collecting those metrics. Yes. There could be existing framework that already can do that. Obviously, there are well-known CNCF projects for collecting traces and metrics and logs. So we can set those up and build it. The last thing would be if there's anything we need on the management clusters, most likely is some sort of interfaces that allows us to report to say, hey, this is so if this happens for this network function instance. Give me an alert or type stuff, or send me all the information that you have from time X to time Y. So that's the kind of things that I think would happen on a management cluster. So the status obviously status reflects on. Oh, sorry.
So as part of this use case, do you want to take some sort of a corrective action?
No, so observability does observabilities. Let's not go into actions.
Yeah.
So in here, I want to see if the status is not met, meaning that turns out I'm not able to do this capacity, or I'm thinking there's something faulty going on for me to accurately measure the capacity. Just make that information available to whatever application sitting on top, seeing that, oh yeah, you have you're doing a 1 gig uplink throughput, but then suddenly you only have a 0 gig downlink. So obviously something's going on. And then it may not be like the problem with the workload, but then now you then expose the informations that are associated with this particular network function instance to upper layer, and then they would do something, or just graph it. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Because the reason is the following of because what you explain, if you look to your slides, can you put
This
your
one?
slide back up?
This one.
I
Oh,
don't
am I not? Oh,
Share.
am I losing the share? Interesting.
You're sharing yourself.
Interesting. Okay.
See, what you see is the observability controller is completely happening on the management cluster.
Oh, no. So the management side of that is, but then yeah, I mean, sorry, the reason why is this is not a fully written system.
So
So
the
obviously
slides
this-
are confusing because so far everything we discuss is on the workload cluster, whereas the slide.
so everything in here is obviously the workload cluster. Yeah, the first one. Sorry, I was supposed to extend this by telling you that there are other stuff over here. I didn't even write the collectors here. So basically, as I go, I do a little more to show you to basically continue to say this is needed because this use case demands that this is done there. But yeah, observability controller is a very simple layer of API, I guess. It has the access to all the collectors. The collector read access are all mapped into that controllers, so you can use APIs to basically grab those information. And
But I think I don't think it's even a controller, by the way. There is a data.
Yeah, there's no CL to drive it. So yes.
Yeah, so there will be. I wouldn't even call it a controller. I think
more like a server.
I would call this a data lake of some sort.
Okay.
And then people can act upon it, but it's not really a controller, I think.
Yeah, so it's not. Yeah, I agree. It's not a controller because it's not like it's acting on a custom resource. It's basically just it's a module.
I mean, the way I see it, it's a data lake, right? So you basically collect information, and then whomever needs to get access to it, be able to get information on it. Now that's being defined in the service assurance, by the way. So the service assurance guys are looking at that.
Has
Go ahead, Liam. Sorry.
Has OpenTelemetry any place here?
So I mean, I did actually. So I did look at that. OpenTelemetry by itself is the mingle is open tracing and some other things. So I look into it in terms of using it. They seem to first publish an SDK and asking applications to utilize some of their facilities or APIs, even in some cases. Open tracing obviously is a set of APIs by itself. But it's probably because of that they start using SDK to start driving things. But it seems to have an application. Well, I mean, I don't want to go and say that you need to change applications, but the intent is to eventually have application context inside. So in here, because we have no control over the applications, it's not. I don't think it's not ideal, but then for what I could see, it's not immediately obvious to me that we can just use.
I think you'd probably have to ask. Yeah, I think you'd have to have the NFs implement something for OpenTelemetry to pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. But I think I would say that we should export our metric using OpenTelemetry framework, right? I think that's what we said, because actually Prometheus metrics is a piece of it, right?
Yeah, you use Prometheus to carry the OpenTelemetry
Oh, but
stuff.
it's so OpenTelemetry. So Prometheus is part of OpenTelemetry these days, right? So OpenTelemetry is indeed, it's a set. It's on one hand a standard, but also a set of libraries that you instrument in your application. But what I think, or my view at least, is that from a Nephew point of view, we should push people towards OpenTelemetry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because what you see is that if you do so, you get a bunch of tools like the thing that I was saying that takes the metrics in and does an action.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of CNCF projects you get out of the box when you do so. So we enable those things. If you do something on our own, so other people have to adopt again. So I would advocate using OpenTelemetry as a format on how we export stuff, and then you get logs tracing and metrics.
Meanings that we make an assumption that the network functions themselves already adapt to Optel.
See, there is a lot of push in the industry for the network functions to go to OpenTelemetry. Whether they do or not is a different thing. But for example, that's why we have a sidecar that does so.
Okay, so if we do the sidecar, we'll expose them using Optel. Okay, that actually makes sense. Yeah,
that's what I would propose.
Yeah,
okay. That makes sense.
That's what I think. Now I've never actually used it myself.
I use Open Tracing, but then when they merge with various different program and become Optel, I actually never use it. I never use the Optel other frameworks. But I use Open Tracing.
I want to so I mean, let's say for the sake of POC, we start with the sidecar, and I want to understand how these things gonna go. That means sidecar is gonna use this kind of thing which will have OpenTelemetry metrics and is going to export all those things up. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it what you're saying? So when it exposes those things to the upper layer, does it also provides information from which NF it is coming, right? That's how, I mean, if we put it in some sort of a data lake.
So I think this is part of what we're supposed to do. So on our side, Nephew operates on, actually this is a much later slide that I talked about a bit. But then currently anyway, our abstraction is on the network function instances. So we should ourselves in Nephew as an applications able to correlate all the visibility data on a network function instance basis.
Yeah. Now for example,
what I'm trying to say,
Go ahead.
So the collector itself will know which NFs it collects from, right? Because it scrapes the endpoint. So the metric exposer, you don't even have to put NF information in it because the collector will know.
So I know 3.5GC would be easy, but then do they know if for example, because I work with commercial vendors before. UPF, for example, is something anywhere from like 6 to 10 pods for different vendors. So would they be able to know that these things are associated with a single network function instance? Is that something
you basically scrape, right? So you scrape the metrics from.
So you on a single service, you're creating just one service endpoint for the entire instance, basically.
No. So you have both choices, by the way. So you have that choice, or you have the choice to scrape it straight, right? From each individual pod. And in which case the metric collector will know for which pod you scrape it from because it has a dedicated endpoint and it will have the information already. So you basically put a set of labels in the metrics and you're done, basically.
Right. So this is for our part. We'll have to kind of push that label to ensure that if we want to associate the.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is that the metric collector itself does it. You don't. So when you set up the metric collector based on the endpoint you attach it to, it knows from which NF.
So we at least we have to do a setup so that we will be telling them that all these pods are in this one instance, and therefore,
metric collector is sorry, I lost it. The part of this Nephew development, or are you saying that it will be from OpenTelemetry?
It's a standard component. You don't have to do anything. You just have to configure it properly.
Okay. Fine. So let's say it has it and it will put those in tags, like for example, even if Prometheus does it.
Mhm.
And okay, so those information will be available in all those data lake kind of scenarios, and anybody who wants to come can take it. Okay, fine. My first question will be the sidecar. Like I am interested in developing one of the sidecar as part of the getting started for the POC. I can take that action after this meeting. My point is, how does this sidecar installation happens? Is it part of the some sort of a deployment in the Nephew?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have
So during deployment, we can inject the sidecar if you want to. There are many ways to inject sidecars.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we
But it
Well,
will be
A, you
part
have
of
to
our,
you have to
it will
develop
be
it.
part of our operator, right? So our
Yeah.
35GC operator will inject the sidecar.
Yeah. So in this case, 35GC will inject it as part of the deployment. So they'll create a second container right next to the workload container.
Okay. Okay. Fine. And then it's individual responsibility of this particular sidecar to do whatever action it wants to do, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the scrapper will take it information, whatever this sidecar provide, puts into the data lake kind of scenarios, and from there it goes on.
And it exposes an OTel interface, right? So an endpoint. And then you can.
Sidecar
Yes.
need to expose one endpoint.
An OTel endpoint, yeah.
What is it?
So open telemetry.
Open telemetry. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. I think.
Yeah, we basically have to
Okay.
use the OTel API, the OTel SDK to build something. In this case, yeah,
Okay.
because when someone asked me about OTel, the one thing I was kind of rejecting was but then you have to change the network functions. But then now that we are building the sidecar, we are part of the network functions, so we can we can actually adapt to that, which is
And that's how we do it, Stephen, today, for example, because our KPIs are not in OTel format. So while we embed it in the network function, you use a sidecar as an intermediate step to.
No, that sounds great. I don't want to invent something here that that someone else has to adapt. That would be silly.
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. Any free 5GC NF we can take, right, and start.
There are three that we are using on the that are going through an operator. We can do it on the all the other 9 or 10 that aren't going through the operators. We can think about doing. Sure.
Okay.
But I think for POC, let's start with something simple.
Yeah.
And by the way, Stephen, do you know that Free5GC has even no SNMP count or nothing? That's 0?
No, not that I know of. I checked many times already on because of this topic. I've been looking around. No, a lot of people use a variety of different external things to try to get more stats off of Free5GC, but natively it doesn't actually expose anything.
I met the guy.
If I may comment, Wim, I'm not sure. I mean, as I know, it's probably there are no metric, but I had once the use case when we subscribed for the user position from the AMF.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I
And
get.
it was
So yeah, I agree with Piotr. So the only thing I get out of them is because they have a web UI to show subscriber informations. So they have a set of REST API that are more related to subscriber related informations.
Yeah, but that's good, right? See, here is the thing, right? If they have that, right, that must be queryable, right? So that means that we don't have to put the eBPF and stuff like that. So because it's way easier to do that. Because what it actually means in that case, you basically query that same API that the web UI uses.
Yeah, but then there's only like more subscriber info. I don't know if they would show you like.
Okay, I'm just saying. What I'm trying to say is that what we should do as a proof of concept somehow is basically we are making a conversion layer, right? So to get metrics. So on one end because with eBPF it's for people, I'm not sure whether people are familiar with it, but it's more involved other than querying an API from an NF. It's very different. And but we are converting it to open telemetry somehow, right? So that information.
Yeah, so you can not the sidecar, but the operator can use, well, the sidecar can use a variety of things to grab what they need.
Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that,
open.
yeah, and that will be useful for the community, in my view, or for the NF vendors as a way to do so. Because as I mentioned before, eBPF most likely is not a viable.
No, I'm okay with that. I'm not insisting on BPF.
And I'm not saying we should exclude it either, right? But I'm just saying that we have to bear that in mind. But if we can get metrics from, let's say, API or SNMP or whatever, exposing that using OpenTelemetry, I think is very useful for the community, because that's probably real life.
Okay. No, yeah, we can do that too. We can the sidecar itself can actually get it REST API calls directly to the to the NF also. So you can do a variety of things to expose.
Could be more generic and maybe adaptive, like all these sidecar. Maybe it can be replaceable with other plugins kind of thing, which does this kind of thing, like getting this data from the APIs and all those things. So this sidecar is
so the moment we use API, the sidecar itself becomes less generic and more NF specific, which is yet another things to think about moving forward. Which is do we want to build one generic sidecar for, you know,
that's what I was asking,
generic networking informations, or do we want to get like a network functions specific ones?
So right now, whatever the data which we're trying to collect will be more or less generic, right? It will not be any specific to.
So that's enough generic things that we can build a generic one for sure.
Currently, because the generic like specific thing comes only when each and every NF start giving their own specific KPIs, like as I said, max input and all those things. Right now, whatever we are trying is, as I see, is generic one, which can fit in any NF.
You will always have to deal with specific information that an NF has, right? So you will not be able to avoid that, in my view.
And probably a lot of the generic information will be available in other ways, you know, like
correct
how they you know, through the generic Kubernetes was, you know.
Yes.
But for example, here is an example of what we did. I will see whether I can get this code out of Nokia at some point. But for example, SNMP, right? Take SNMP as a vehicle. Okay, I would bet that Samsung, Ericsson, and Nokia has different MIPS, right? So the SNMP mechanism is still generic, but the OIDs that you put in SNMP will be specific to the vendor implementation on how to get certain data out of it, right? So in other words, so what I'm trying to say is that using SNMP as a generic method to get information out will be common, right? But the specific OIDs that you use for every vendor will be specific, right? So what you could do is make this collector or this sidecar data-driven, so is that you say, this is Ericsson, okay, here is the OID for these counters, and here is Nokia, and here is Samsung, and based on that, so as a result, you make it generic, right? But the implementation of each vendor will be specific. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So I mean, REST API, that means you kind of like register or include a bunch of different REST API, or maybe just a Go plugin. But so we could make it generic so that it's probably a thing that Nepio can contribute to vendors. So I definitely want to see that. Yes, that we're building something that vendors can use.
Yeah, understood.
If I may, I have a question for you about the injection itself. At some point you said that, or we might don't remember, you said that probably the 35DC operator or the network function operator will inject the sidecar. I'm just wondering if this is the right place to make it, or because it's really related to the observability framework itself, because you need to then, I don't know if you will use push or pull model in the OTel, but then you need to configure the both sides, the receiver and the sender. If you do this on the observability framework level, that the observability framework, I don't know, controller or something will inject the sidecars, it will be aware about all the endpoints. Will be the 35DC operator aware about that to inject the sidecar and configure the both sides?
Wait, so the free 5GC will not configure the observability. Wait, so here is what we did. I can explain what we did, okay? So we have an option in our deployment, right? That basically says inject the sidecar or not, okay? When you decide to inject so it's a knob basically that you put in the deployment. And if you do so, it will deploy a sidecar as well as it deploys a service that has the right annotation for the observability to discover the endpoint, right? So what you typically do with the observability solutions that you have, like if you take Prometheus, what you do is you expose the service and you annotate the service with a special label that tells you, hey, I'm a Prometheus endpoint or what. I don't know the semantics exactly, but that's more or less how you do it. So that happens in the free 5GC. So for every sidecar, you will have a service endpoint that is your hotel endpoint, if you will, and that you make available inside of the cluster for other people then to consume, right? And then the observability framework looks at all the services with that annotation, and as a result, it discovers which service or which hotel endpoints are available, and that's how they can consume them. You see? So it's split. So in other words, the deployment of the sidecar is a decision, in my view, of the free 5GC operator, because he will decide whether he will expose metrics, yes or no, right? And then the consumption, and he also does it in a way that other people can discover it, that it exists, right? And then the observers, if you will, they have a certain semantics to know, okay, that's how a certain endpoint is described. And if that's available inside of the cluster, I know that they exist and I can consume them.
Right. So I actually agree with that. And in terms of framework, that makes sense, because now it is up to the level function vendors to see whether or not they want to if they integrate with Netfio, do they want to actually turn on observability or anything like that? It's up to their operators to say, oh, for deployment or my stateful set or whatever on a container spec, the pod spec, I have to add this container, a sidecar. Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I just wondering if you had an experience. I had some experience with Prometheus, and not with Auto itself. How do you see this dynamic, probably reconfiguration of endpoints? I mean, it's not that hard if you push to the collector, but in my opinion, it's the pool patient-based model is used often, most frequently, and I just considering about this reconfiguration, because you can start you can deploy let's see the process. You deploy the operator, the operator deploys the network functions, the new endpoint is showing, and okay, so we do not consider how this reconfiguration or the reconfiguration of the collector will be done. Yeah, we just assume that there is some discovery mechanism, and that's all.
Yeah, no, correct. I mean, I see when we started, we had different knobs, by the way. So because at the time, I'm talking now 3 or 4 years ago, like AWS collector versus Google was different, by the way. So we had a knob to say, okay, work in AWS mode or work in Google mode or work in this mode and stuff like that, right? So in the meantime, my view is that with Hotel, this has much more, became much more uniform. And as a result, I think you only need one knob to say, I need observability and not, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not having the full experience, so we might have to see whether there are some...
cross cloud. I don't think any of us has done it yet with Hotel, but then if we are converging on Hotel, then yeah, just exposing Hotel endpoint is we can forget about that, all that other knobs. We're basically saying that.
My view from a year ago, Stephen, is that both Google and AWS were all OTel compliant. So as a result, we could have reduced. We basically reduced the knob. But so in other words, it's still it has. What I'm trying to say is that it has become more uniform than it used to be, and that's why I was pushing to do OTel based, because that seems to be the way the industry goes. And so let's Nephew try to
makes sense.
So Piotr, so to your point is, does it solve all or does it cover all the cases? I don't know, but I believe more than in the past, right? So does it make sense or not?
So if I may go back to my previous question about the sidecar, so Steven or the community, do we see the sidecar as the solution that we'll have the sidecar on the Nefio, and this is Nefio native approach?
So that would be the goal. That would be the goal. So the goal would be as Wim said, right? So the sidecar eventually would have to get to a point where we will support a good set of connection points, if you will, the different connection protocols, if you will, at least, or ways of connecting to it. So they can expose using REST, exposing SNMP, expose using different types of technology, and if they have nothing, then Nephew also come with some very simplistic Linux-based networking ability, visibility, scripting capabilities, and then we can expose it using a standard Octal endpoint out of this. So we encourage, obviously, network function vendors to use it, because as a community we'll implement, we'll develop this with standard interfaces, but it's obviously up to the network function vendors. But once they do that, then it will work with all other things, because we haven't moved past this slide. It's the fact that as part of Nephew, we will also be setting up the collectors based on optimally creating, automate that portion of the work. So once you have that using Octal endpoints, and using Octal to install some of the collectors directly, off more of a edge and core type architecture, then they would be able to just leverage the same infrastructure to spin up this set of collectors. And maybe cross vendor they'll be able to use the same configurations. Probably not, but at least the same setup. Maybe they need a different instance, but
So Stephen, if I may, so the way I see it is this, right? So ideally, the network function vendors have native OTel support. Okay, that's the what we eventually want to have. The sidecar is a vehicle to mediate of vendors that do not have a full OTel implementation, but expose an OTel interface. So that's it's basically an implementation. My view on Nephew is that we will do a reference implementation on how that will look, vendors to consume it, right? And then that's basically how we should, how I see the situation.
But just like we do free 5GC is not expected to be deployed. But then it's a reference anyone can follow to do it that way, or any other ways they feel comfortable with. But then if they want to use a sidecar, if they can also do it, which is also we'll try our best to accommodate.
Maybe last one comment from my side. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not aware about everything but as I saw, the community, for example, in the service mesh solution is trying to meet the observability sidecar and go for the different not observability, the sidecar concept itself, and maybe it's some strange use case, but in the context of service mesh, it's BPF or sidecar, and we are trying to have the BPF in the sidecar.
Actually, it's
I think it's
actually about so if you're talking about Istio, is for Cilium, the BPF is there to help the envoy, but then they push it out of the sidecar, so they make it like a per host thing. And then I think the mesh itself, the Istio as a project itself, is moving to cTunnel.
Yeah, so to ambient mesh, basically.
The ambient meshed. So there are many things to get out of the Envoy sidecar. So that is correct. That is actually happening right now.
Now the reason, so the issue with the sidecar is the life cycle of a sidecar is tied to the life cycle of the main pod, right? So that's one of the issues with which you have. So the whole issue, and of course, in here we are basically collecting information. So it's a bit, I think, if you look to service mesh, it's a bit of a different beast compared to observability from my perspective.
It does a lot more. It proxies all the connections and
so it's a data plane basically, right? So that means that you run a data plane next to each and every other instance. But so the main issue remains that upgradability of a sidecar is tied to your network function as such, right? So that's still an issue. But okay, in theory, those things should, I hopefully, if you have the right mediation, should not be upgraded as much as possible. Whereas with service mesh, you get a new protocol or you get a new HTTP header and you have to adopt, right? So there it's way different as far as I see.
I don't think the industry was expecting that HTTP 2 and 3 would be so close to each other in terms of coming out. So that was a bit of a shock for everyone, that they're thinking that this must be very stable, but it's, I guess, QUIC is really popular. But anyway, so for what we do, so A, let's get the POC out of the way, which is important, and B, it is, as Wim said, a reference to show people how it's supposed to be done. But we are building hopefully good software. So if for vendors who wants to adapt, they can just take it and use it, hopefully useful. So
it's a reference with the goal to for people to adopt, right? So I'm not saying so it doesn't mean that vendors have to adopt, but if the code, we should write very good code. So as a result, it should serve for people as a vehicle to adopt it. But if vendors want to do it themselves, okay, so be it, right?
So from POC point of view, I have a question, like when we deploy, do we also say a kind of matrix or KPI we want, or it just collects anything, whatever is exposed, or it gets?
So the way it worked for us, so we have a set of standard. So we have basically a configuration. So as part of the configurability of the network function, we have like a set of default metrics that we expose by default that you don't even have to configure. And then you have a way, but it happens through the network function interface, of a way to expose which metrics you additionally want to have for it.
Right.
That's how we have done it in our implementation. So we have default metrics and then let's say optional metrics, if you will. And those optionals, you have the ability to configure.
To turn it on or not, turn it on, turn it off.
So ultimately, even if I give you everything, you will have all of them, right? Even if you configure something to be get from that particular thing, it has to be available there, right? So in other words, if we are getting everything, more or less, that is kind of a superset, right?
Well, so if you turn this cycle on, by default you get at least that much metrics or logs and stuff. But then if you have vendor specific things that are exposed, and you can optionally turn it on. Or the vendor things are actually important. So it's not so much the metrics. So it's a set of KPI that we do. By default, we have this KPI that maps into certain things that we expose by the sidecar. But then there are other KPIs that requires vendor specific things that are being exposed. So for those, we're requesting vendors to actually map them, so we know how to actually collect them.
Yeah, what I was trying to understand is it kind of a system where based on the type of metrics data available from the particular NF, one of the higher level thing can decide from where to query and all those things. We're not into that thing, right?
No, I don't think so.
No, we want, we want you to, if you have different ways to if you need some way to like go to a EMS or something outside of your workload to get stats, that's a very different thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you look GNMI, but now we are really advanced, right? You can actually, the collector itself can subscribe to the metric, the device supports dynamically. So, but okay, it goes way too, it's way more advanced system.
Yeah. Okay. So here I understand. What is that? So fine.
So anyhow, so anything was another layer would be the operators would have to actually understand metrics so that they can actually set the proper statuses. So that's one of the requirements too. Not just metrics, maybe other things too. But
So
but
that's
then whatever.
part of the observability in Nephew.
So it's part of what we do in terms of collecting. Some of the things needs to be available for the operators to query. So that's basically one of the requirements that I'm setting off as part of this POC.
But for example, so Steven, here is my comment, right? Like you take let's say the thing on capacity. If you look like the autoscaler, it's not the operator, but it's actually another controller that looks at certain metrics that you configure, and he will do scale in, scale out of your network function. So he will change the replicas or
no, so that's taking actions. But then in here, we want operators to report if there's some changes based on observing states.
Yeah, but here is my thing, right? So let me explain what I'm trying to say. If you have someone who is taking care of certain things on your behalf, right? Let's say the replica. Let's say I'm talking about capacity, right? At the end of the day, what will you report upstream? You will most likely not report on capacity because someone is dealing with it already for you, right? What you will report is, hey, I have 5 replicas, of which 4 are okay and 1 is not okay. So what I'm trying to get to is the amount of information you report from an operator is different potentially.
Yeah. So the operator needs to be aware that something has happened, and then for that reason, and then they update the status by just for observability reasons. So because action is taken, as you said. But then the event needs to be kind of exposed, so people would know, or log it at least, so people would know actually that happened.
Yeah, but the logging of that event is already taken care of by the controller that acts upon it, right? So he does that. So that's why I'm saying if you look to this system holistically, that's why I'm talking about the upstream as a data lake, right? Because what you see is that most likely you will have various actors. That's how Kubernetes works today, right? You have various actors that act upon a thing, right? And they report upon the actions or the changes with respect to that thing, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the operator as such is not completely in charge of all the actions. It's a distributed system, right? So in other words, the operator itself will have a set of things that he is responsible for, but there is others that also have responsibilities, right? So as a result, I don't expect the operator to be a god that knows everything about the network function. It will be a distributed thing. So, and typically those people that act will report on the actions they do and why they did it, right? Rather than trying to then put
okay. So that remains would be what remains is the data that requires the other controllers to act upon this, which still needs to be made available on the workload clusters.
Yes.
And then B, in terms of that data, the events that are generated and things like that needs to still be collected centrally on the observability framework. So,
yes, but
the data lake would then be able to expose that information for subscribers that are interested.
Yeah, but look at how Google works today, right? Google Anthos, right? So basically you say, hey, I have a set of, so Google collects a set of data metrics by themselves, right? So everything regarding infra, and then you can optionally add other elements into it, right? So basically if you say network function metrics, if you say I expose it, then basically in Google Anthos, what you do is you say, okay, here I put an annotation on this endpoint, and it will automatically collect that information up to Google Cloud, right? And so that's what I'm calling a data lake, right? So in other words, I haven't built an operator to do so. I basically have exposed a distributed system, and I say to that data lake, hey, here is all the information that I give to you. Go and grab it and expose it to a central site, right? And that's why I'm saying it's a distributed operation. It's not one thing, it's multiple stuff. And then it gets collected over there, and then the central guy will manual and look at various information and can do stuff about it. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So as I said, if we have other controllers in the workload clusters that are accessing those data and then make the decisions and self-healed on the workload clusters, so it doesn't really bother anything.
It's possible.
But then at least expose the events, reasons, and whatever information is needed. The NetField data lake would have to be collecting that, expose it to whatever application are subscribing to those events would be able to just grab it.
But if these guys also do OTel, right? If everybody use OTel, then OTel is the framework to do so. And then you need an OTel data lake, and that takes care of it. You see what I'm saying?
See, what I'm trying to ask is like, okay, I understand this, but as part of the observability framework, are we trying to change some status of NF, or are we trying to introduce some sort of observability status of NF, which we can indicate to anyone saying that, okay, this NF is not well in terms of observability? Is it the plan? Is it going to be happen in this framework or no?
So now we are into service assurance, by the way. Okay, so we are now we are overlapping with service assurance, because that's what they have in mind, by the way, as well. So, but going back to the thing, what I was saying before is the action based on the metrics to scale in and scale out a controller already exists. We don't have to do anything for this. Right? There will be other actions that does not exist, but what I'm trying to say is that the service assurance guys are
the actions is not what I'm looking for. The
stepping onto
because observability is not working on actions. We're working on exposing, even if something that has nothing to do with observability has taken the actions, the event needs to be logged and exposed. So the observability framework needs to be able to collect this and make it available for any applications that are interested in the event. So that's all I'm asking. I don't care about the actions. Whoever taking the actions is a completely different problem. But then as far as the observability framework for NetField, even in the case of someone taking actions locally, the event is to be exposed. So that's the only thing I'm looking for.
And what I'm saying is, or advocating is, do it in OTel format.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so that was the thing talking about. So this becomes some sort of octal related data lake, and then this information would then be, they'll be collecting it from things, and then for anyone who's interested, so I'm interested in subscribing to the set of things, deployment states of all the network function instances. Whatever this data lake has to be able to filter it or correlate all the data into things that the people are interested in, and then be able to make it available for streaming or
whatever.
So that's basically the full framework of the observability.
Right.
So I mean, I guess we're 12 minutes over time, but then I guess on Slack we can talk about some of the further details of what we're going, and then we'll see how we're gonna kick off a simple POC.
Yeah, POC is what I'm also looking for. Thanks.
Yeah. Let's do stuff, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe whatever way it goes, we will see that.
No, we want to see the thing work end to end. So
yeah. Okay then.
So let's. I mean, we're not concluding who's doing what on this meeting, but But then let's get it on Slack, and then once people are volunteering, contributors are volunteering to pieces, then we can have other meetings.
Sure.
Mhm.
I'm very interested.
Yeah, this looks good. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'll also make this slide available.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.